Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Judy Kennedy. I'm the mayor of the city of Lynn, Massachusetts, and we are so proud to be able to host this field meeting on behalf of Congressman Hanna and Congressman Moulton. I'd just like to tell you a little bit about the SBIR program that will be discussed today. The Small Business Innovation Research Program, which is known as SBIR, is a highly competitive program that encourages domestic small businesses to engage in federal research and development that has the potential for commercialization. Through a competitive awards-based program, SBIR enables small businesses to explore their technological potential and provides the incentive to profit from its commercialization. By including qualified small businesses in the nation's R&D arena, high-tech innovation is stimulated, and the United States gains entrepreneurial spirit as it meets its specific research and development needs. I am so pleased that today's hearing is going to be chaired by Congressman Richard Hanna from New York, who is here visiting with us today, as well as our own congressman from the 6th District, Seth Moulton. It's very nice to see this bipartisan cooperation. With everything that goes on in Washington and the stories we hear, you would think that this would be a rare sight, and I'm truly hoping that it isn't, and I'm hoping that more of our congressmen and women will follow the lead of these two fine gentlemen. So again, welcome to all of you, and I would like to turn this hearing over now to Chairman Richard Hanna. Chairman Hanna.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everyone. I call this hearing to order. And again, I want to thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure to. I have never seen a city hall as nice as this in my life, and I visited a lot of them. It really shows the foresight of the people who built it. We have a wonderful auditorium, and it's just great. Today, we're holding the second of two hearings our committee has conducted this month concerning the reauthorization of the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Programs, also known as SBIR and STTR. Before I begin, though, I want to thank our ranking member, Mr. Moulton, for inviting us to be in his district today. In the short time we've served together in the House, I have found him to be a tenacious advocate for his constituents and for the causes he cares about. I would expect nothing less than from a Marine, especially one with his pedigree. So thank you very much. Although we've only worked together for about a year on the Small Business Committee, he's shown a great willingness to work across the aisle, find solutions for the challenges facing America and for their small businesses. I'm very happy to be here with him, and I say that honestly. It's not just rhetoric. I've watched Seth work, and he is a very bright and dedicated individual. Innovation is the engine that drives our economy. Technological breakthroughs and entrepreneurship build our economy by finding state-of-the-art solutions to difficult problems. In this area of globalization, making it easier for small businesses to develop and commercialize new, innovative products is essential for America's competitiveness and national security. This is why programs like SBIR and STTR are so very, very important. Their purpose is to increase government funding of small businesses that conduct R&D with a focus on technology and high commercial potential. By including small businesses in the nation's R&D effort, SBIR and STTR awards stimulate innovative new technologies that help federal agencies in a wide variety of areas. These programs are important because the awards go to small innovators who have always been at the cutting edge of science and technology, like the folks here in our panel today. You are the ones that have the ideas and the willingness to take big risks and search for big rewards. Maybe you quit your job and started your business in your garage. Maybe you worked on the side with one of your colleagues to turn an idea into reality. Whatever your individual story is, the entrepreneurial spirit is what drove you to create this new technology that your country benefits from. The next big thing doesn't just materialize. It happens with a lot of late nights and even more sweat. Ideas matter, but executing those ideas is what's most important. Obviously, not every idea is a good one. I work in Congress. I've been involved in this firsthand. But the long odds rarely discourage entrepreneurs. The successful ones keep driving forward, thinking and inventing and renewing our economy in the process. That is why these programs are so vital. Whether it is a new software system or tracking contract payments, the new medical device to help with cancer treatment, or a new piece of technology that saves lives in the battlefield, the SBIR and the STTR programs have consequently delivered results across many, many agencies. These programs were last authorized in 2011 in order to give entrepreneurs stable, predictability. We're getting a jump start on reauthorizing them before next year's deadline, which is part of why we're having this hearing and had the last one a couple of weeks ago. Today we have a very distinguished panel of private sector witnesses who have participated in the programs or worked with small firms that have participated in the programs. We look forward to hearing from your experiences and listening to your suggestions on how we can make these good programs even better. Again, I want to thank you for allowing me the privilege of being in your community. I'd like to yield now to my good friend, Ranking Member Mr. Moulton, for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me first thank you for driving all the way out here from New York to be with us here in the 6th District in Lynn, and to tangibly thank you for your trip. I have a small gift for you. Oh, cool. This is not a product of the SBIR program, but it is a proud product of Lynn that makes your trip entirely worthwhile. It is, of course, a big tub of marshmallow fluff.
I always thought this stuff came from space. Well, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, your leadership on this subcommittee and your leadership in the committee at large means a lot to me as a freshman, and as a freshman who's in the minority and was elected on a platform of bipartisanship, but has had to go to Washington to figure out how to actually make that happen. And I'll tell you, I have found a welcome home on the Small Business Committee. I passed my first bill in the House of Representatives out of the Small Business Committee, which is because of the bipartisan working spirit that we have on that committee. And it's thanks to people like you who are willing to go across the aisle, even when it may, create trouble in primaries back home or whatnot, that I'm able to do that. So thank you very much for your leadership in this difficult Congress. We're very glad to be here with you today to discuss the SBIR and STTR programs. Since their establishment, these programs have helped launch tens of thousands of successful research projects, many of them right here in Massachusetts. In the past 30 years, the SBIR and STTR programs have become major sources of funding for small businesses, and on average, more than $2 billion each year is awarded through these programs. With these awards, companies in Massachusetts are working on a wide array of research, from a business in Wilmington working with the Navy to develop a smaller, lightweight laser module for NAVSEA, to a Cambridge firm designing a system for modeling cyber behaviors to assess risk. Firms are researching and developing products that have helped increase military efficiency and minimize adversarial threats. And these are just some examples coming out of the Department of Defense. At HHS, another Massachusetts firm is developing a device that provides compression to amputees with poor blood flow in their limbs. And at the EPA, an awardee in Marlborough is developing a nanofiltration system that targets emerging contaminants in the water supply, like pharmaceuticals and pesticides. After today's hearings, a few SBIR participants showcased their research and technology around the room, further demonstrating the innovative solutions that businesses in the 6th District and beyond are coming up with to solve the problems that agencies are facing today. Not only do these discoveries aid government agencies, they also help our communities by allowing small companies to be innovative and think big. SBIR and STTR-funded firms generate economic growth and create job opportunities in local communities. I look forward to hearing the personal stories of our witnesses as to how these programs have allowed them to contribute to our community. These programs were last reauthorized in 2011 and are set to expire, as the chairman said, in 2017. It is the Small Business Committee's goal to pass a reauthorization during this Congress so as to provide both agencies and businesses the certainty that these programs will continue. Yet before we do so, it is important to take stock of the most recent reforms and determine how we can improve these programs to better suit small businesses. Last week, the chairman and I had the opportunity to hear from various agencies about the administration of these programs and ways by which they are making them more accessible to applicants. But equally, if not more important, is feedback from the actual small business owners who are participating in these programs. The last reauthorization contained various provisions aimed at commercialization, and I am interested to hear how the SBIR and STTR communities have received these reforms. Additionally, there have been several efforts made to diversify the applicants to these programs. Unfortunately, there has not been as much success on this front, so I'm especially looking forward to hearing from our panel to learn how we can get new companies interested in the programs. I hope that today's hearing can shed light on some of the issues small businesses face in this program to help us identify ways to improve these programs during the upcoming reauthorization. As we have seen, Massachusetts SBIR and SCTR participants are leading the way in research, and I am privileged to be here today to solicit their advice. With that, I would like to thank the panel for their testimony, and again thank Chairman Hanna for joining us here in Lynn. Thank you, and I yield back.
Maybe you'd like to introduce your witnesses.
It'd be my pleasure to introduce our witnesses, and I will start with Ann Eskesen, the president of Innovation Development Institute located in Swampscott. At the Institute, Ms. Eskesen helps SBIR and STTR participants bring their technology from the labs to the marketplace. She is a longtime advocate of these programs, and we are happy to have her here today to share her expertise. Next, we have Dr. David Green, President and CEO of Physical Sciences Incorporated, located in Andover, who will today testify on behalf of the New England Innovation Alliance. NEIA is an informal association of small, high-technology companies in New England. It acts as a forum for small businesses, allowing them to share their experiences and challenges as they have done business with the U.S. government. Dr. Green has a Ph.D. from MIT in physical chemistry and is active in the R&D operations of PSI, a company with approximately 200 active programs annually. Next, we are joined by Dr. Charles Kolb, president of Aerodyne Research Incorporated. I'm proud to say that Aerodyne is located in Billerica, right here in the 6th District, and specializes in advanced sensor and software projects. Dr. Kolb first joined Aerodyne in 1971 after completing his Ph.D. in physical chemistry at Princeton. He has authored or co-authored over 225 publications and has actively participated on various National Academy of Sciences boards and committees related to atmospheric and environmental science. I had the opportunity to speak with Dr. Kolb in December at the SBIR STTR Innovation Awareness Day, and I am grateful that he is here today to share more about his company. Thank you. Lastly, we have Mr. Jerry Bird. Mr. Bird is the president of MassVentures located in Boston. He has over 25 years of experience advising and financing companies, including 19 years working in venture capital. He has operated both as an investor and an active partner in helping entrepreneurs build their firms. We have heard from many small businesses that they have difficulty accessing additional capital for their research, so I look forward to hearing from Mr. Bird about what businesses can do to attract investors. Thank you all for being here today. Explain this. Yeah, okay. If committee members have an opening statement prepared, I ask that it be submitted for the record. We don't have lights for the 5 minutes. We do. Okay. Got it, right there in front. Okay. So let me just explain the timing lights here in front of us, familiar to those of us who've spent time in Washington. but certainly new to me this year. So basically, you all have 5 minutes. The light will start out as green. When you have 1 minute remaining, the light will turn to yellow, and then finally, at the end of your 5 minutes, it will turn to red. And try as best you can, please, to adhere to the time limit. All right.
You can recognize anybody.
Okay.
Start right at left, Mr. Byrd.
Okay. Mr. Byrd, why don't we start with you?
Thank you. I want to thank Chairman Hanna and Congressman Moulton for inviting me to testify today on the critical need to reauthorize the SBIR STTR program. My name is Jerry Byrd, and I'm the president of MassVentures. MassVentures is a quasi-public venture capital firm based in Boston and focused on fueling the Commonwealth's innovation economy by funding early-stage, high-risk, high-growth potential Massachusetts startups as they move from concept to commercialization. We were honored last year to receive the prestigious Tibbetts Award from the SBA, recognizing our significant role in driving innovation and creating new jobs through the SBIR and STTR programs. When MassVentures was formed 38 years ago, it was the first program of its kind in the country. As is often the case here in Massachusetts, our model and our mission, which is to provide startups with early funding, guidance in operations, finance, and sales, and position them for additional rounds of funding from traditional VC sources, has now been replicated across the country and across the world. In our 38 years, MassVentures portfolio companies have raised an additional $1.1 billion in other investors' capital. They've directly created 7,500 jobs in Massachusetts, and 16 have gone public. In many cases, these companies got going based on SBIR, STTR funding. The SBIR, STTR programs have played a vital role in harnessing the immense human capital of Massachusetts higher education, medical, and research institutions. The programs provide opportunities for small firms which create great ideas but are unable to attract traditional venture capital funding or need seed funding to pursue those projects because the private sector has decided they are too high risk, too early, or not lucrative enough. However, it's exactly these high-risk, high-reward projects that truly drive innovation in Massachusetts. There is no question SBIR, STTR was effective in allowing concepts to begin the road to commercialization. But even after 2 years of funding, many companies weren't ready. Research was still ongoing, prototypes need testing, or often the company's founders weren't ready to juggle innovation with the everyday demands of operations, finance, and sales. It's hard to master your elevator pitch when you're spending all your time in a lab trying to create something that's never been created before. The federal government had played its role. SBIR, STTR has brought many companies to the verge of commercialization, but there were still too many instances where we were left asking what could have been. A gap remained. In 2012, we created the SBIR Targeted Technologies Program, START, to bridge that gap and ensure Massachusetts growing companies would be able to commercialize technologies that had been developed under SBIR, STTR contracts. Recognizing that innovation, invention, and disruption take time, the START program provides up to 3 additional years of funding for these SBIR projects. Stage 1 companies get $100,000 grants. A year later, Stage 2 companies get $200,000 grants. And the third year, 2 companies are eligible for $500,000 grants. So the most successful ones received $800,000, strictly to commercialize. In just 4 years, START has provided $9 million in grant funding to 40 deserving companies. These companies have already gone on to raise an additional $138 million of capital and seen at least a 30% employee growth in Massachusetts. We've created an ecosystem of more than 200 companies, reviewers, service providers, and advisors. For example, Energid of Burlington and Cambridge started as a robotics software company that created software to control the robotic arm on the space shuttle. It was clear that there was a broader application for their software and expertise, so it took the risk of creating a small arm-sized robot to demonstrate the power and potential of its software. In 2013, we awarded it a Stage 1 grant. company has gone on to sell its robots to early adopters and is now in discussions with major global corporations and poised to sell thousands of units. Again, technology developed to control the robotic arm on the space shuttle is now used to assemble components and even pick oranges. A Massachusetts-based software company supported through MassVentures, the SBIR program, and START, Energid has emerged as a leading robotic technology company. START has proven innovation can happen anywhere. While we evaluate them based on as investment professionals, there is nonetheless a remarkable geographic diversity amongst the START winners. Companies outside of Boston and Cambridge that might have otherwise lacked the time, resources, support, or network necessary for success now have it. There are START companies in Barnstable, Canton, Charlton, Georgetown, Newburyport, and Wilbraham, and they all have the potential to be economic anchors in their community. Just as MassVentures was, we believe the START program should serve as a national model for how states can best leverage the federal government's investment through the $2 billion a year coming out of the program. These programs are essential in order to allow American scientists and researchers to innovate, invent, and discover the technologies of tomorrow. But states must also do their part to build on the progress made through the SBIR funding and ensure those technologies of tomorrow are not always a day away. We encourage you to reauthorize the SBIR STTR program so Massachusetts can continue to work with the federal government to grow and commercialize world-changing companies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bird. Dr. Kolb.
Mr. Chairman and distinguished ranking member, thank you for inviting me to testify today about the effectiveness of the Small Business Innovation Research and the Small Business Technology Transfer programs. My company, Aerodyne Research Incorporated, was founded in the late 1970s as a contract research organization focused on improving the nation's strategic defense systems. We have subsequently broadened our range of expertise to include energy technology and major environmental issues such as stratospheric ozone depletion, ambient air quality, acid deposition, and climate change. The SBIR program started in 1982 and the STTR program started in 1992 have become major sources of federal R&D funding for many scientists and engineers employed by small businesses. However, the federal agency's expectations for successful SBIR and STTR grants or contracts are significantly higher than that expected for normal research funding. SBIR and STTR funding is expected to produce the same level of new scientific understanding and technological advances as normal R&D funding, all properly documented in scholarly articles and patents in both cases. However, SBIR and STTR funding is also expected to produce an innovative product that either solves a mission agency's designated need or can be easily engineered to compete successfully in commercial markets. Ideally, both mission agency adoption and commercial sales success are achieved. At ARI, we have adopted a strategy of using SBIR and STTR funds to develop proprietary technology that we can use to expand our own staff's research capabilities. Then we sell them to our R&D peers worldwide. Our most successful tactic is to develop new and better ways to measure both gas phase and small aerosol particle pollutants in real time and with very high sensitivity and specificity. Starting in the mid-1990s, we have used SBIR and STTR funds to develop 3 lines of mobile, robust instruments that can be used both in the laboratory and in field measurements to measure the properties and concentrations of air pollutants. Since 2000, the capabilities and sales of these 3 instrument lines have evolved dramatically. From 2000 to 2015, our instrument sales have grown from less than $1 million to over $14 million per year. In FY 2015, instrument sales provided 60% of our corporate revenue, with R&D projects supplying 35%. Over the past 15 years, we have earned $80 million from instrument sales to customers on 6 continents, with approximately 80% of the sales outside the U.S., helping our nation's balance of payments. We have also hired a significant number of instrument engineers and assembly technicians to help develop, assemble, test, and service our instrument product lines. We are proud of our scientific accomplishments as well. During the FY 2000 to 2015 period, we were supported by other funding sources to perform over $18 million worth of laboratory and field measurements using our instrument products. Recent sponsors' research projects have measured methane and other pollutant emissions from oil and gas operations, including fracking well pads, gas plants, transmission pipeline compressors, and gas storage facilities all over North America, including the recent Aliso Canyon gas storage facility mega leak near Los Angeles. We have also recently mapped air toxic pollution levels in poor neighborhoods near the Houston Ship Channel and measured trace gas and fine particle air pollution levels in Beijing. Our research staff contributes to our nation's reservoir of scientific knowledge. In 2015, ARI scientists published 75 peer-reviewed archival papers, most based on measurements using our instrument products. We also received 3 U.S. patents for innovations to improve instrument performance. ARI has twice been named the Department of Energy's SPIR STTR Company of the Year in 2006 and 2013. These awards recognize our staff's contribution to DOE's environmental research programs, as well as our supplying their national laboratory scientists with important new research tools. At our company and many hundreds of others, support from SBIR and STTR programs has successfully stimulated the production of the full range of scientific, technological, and economic benefits envisioned when Congress created these programs. Reauthorizing them will serve our nation well.
Dr. Kolb, thank you very much. Dr. Green.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman Hanna and Ranking Member Moulton. Thank you for your interest in the SBIR program and allowing our innovative companies to participate and share their stories with you today. SBIR represents America's seed capital and has created many new companies, excellent high technology jobs, and many publications and patents. Its success has not been duplicated anywhere in the world. The SBIR program funds concepts at a very early stage where no other similar funding source exists. It allows the risk takers to retain and reap the rewards of their dedicated efforts. The government and the agencies are patient investors, but however, ultimately the investment is returned through taxes. Recent studies by the national academies and by the mission agencies report its great success. Every government dollar results in over $3 in revenue after the Phase 2 program. SBIR is a great program, but I wish today to make 3 suggestions for your consideration to make it even better. The SBIR program has demonstrated its value over the past 33 years. Please make it permanent. A long-term charter for the program allows for better agency planning and staffing. The 14 short-term continuations before the last reauthorization made it difficult for the agencies to execute the program and made it impossible for the small businesses to maintain staff and to advance their technologies. Since that reauthorization, the SBIR program managers and staff at SBA and at all the agencies have shown great dedication and commitment to making this good program even better and to make it ever more companies aware of its existence, and we thank them. My second suggestion is to increase the allocation to the SBIR program. This program is budget neutral. Our request is to shift more resources to the program that has proven its effectiveness. Currently, only 3% of the R&D funding in federal agencies is allocated to SBIR. I ask that you increase that allocation gradually to 5% over the next decade, and to focus the funds from that increase to maturing technologies after the initial Phase 2 program. For many years, many worthy technologies have died at the conclusion of Phase 2 programs because the technology, although demonstrated, is not in a form recognized as viable by a commercial company or by a mission agency. The gap has become known as the Valley of Death for SBIR technologies. Too many of them do not make it through to become viable commercial products. Many receive some post-Phase 2 funding, but it is too little, too fragmented, and too restrictive. The Commercialization Readiness Program, created in 2011 reauthorization, has begun to address this need. I urge you to consider increasing the SBIR allocation and focusing it on further maturation of promising technologies after Phase 2. My last suggestion is to make access to the SBIR program easier so that a wider diversity of companies compete and win programs. We all understand that it's not easy doing business with the federal government. Instructions are complex, submission is complex, regulations are complex. The requirement for a government-approved accounting system is a very large barrier to new participants. We ask that you consider strongly encouraging the agencies to use fixed-price, best-effort contracts for Phase 2 programs, with the prototype remaining at the small business to enable its transition to a commercial product. This will reduce the burden on both the companies and the government contracting officers to a fraction of the level that is needed in a cost-plus type contract. Fixed price will enable speedier contract awards and more rapid advance of the technology. The innovators will spend more time on their technology rather than complying with the FAR. Most importantly, this will encourage many new entities to participate in the SBIR program. Our employee-owned company, PSI, has successfully transitioned many SBIR technologies. We find the fastest way to move the technology to market. Just one example, under NIH NEI sponsorship, PSI, working with clinical researchers, developed a retinal tracking method permitting greatly improved eye examinations. We partnered with a leading eye equipment manufacturer, and they have sold 16,000 systems containing our technology over the last 8 years, producing $1 billion in revenues for that company, and also, more importantly, providing better eye care for tens of millions of Americans. We've also developed a variety of other technologies in environmental monitoring. Under DNDO sponsorship, PSI has implemented novel algorithms that vastly improve radiation sensor performance at screening portals. And under Army sponsorship, we've developed a small UAV to provide our warfighters, law enforcement and firefighters, with situational awareness. This capability is increasing national security and already being used outside of this country, saving lives of our military. The SBIR program is one of the most successful in the government. Today, I've offered 3 suggestions to improve this wonderful program. I ask you to please reauthorize the program now, to increase its allocation, and to use contracting methods that encourage new companies to participate. SBIR's success is documented in the National Academy studies. I ask you to reauthorize it to keep technology innovation strong in America.
Thank you, Dr. Green. Ms. Eskesen.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I appreciate your scheduling this hearing because it is a different type of hearing, I think, to those that we've had previously, and for giving me opportunity to be one of those involved. As you mentioned, I was part of the small group that created was involved in the development and the passage and the implementation of the original enabling legislation. And that means that I bring a very different perspective to this hearing than some of those we've heard from individual awardees. Clearly, as a long-time SBIR advocate, I strongly support reauthorization, and I think the ideas you've heard mentioned are ones very well worth consideration. But I'd also energetically argue that if we're truly to draw down the full value of what SBIR has created, we must understand what that full value is and factor it into our discussions. In my judgment, from over 35 years of SBIR involvement, SBIR is better understood not simply as a small business program, but one with enormous, powerful, and considerable impact in the development of new technologies, new businesses, and an economic development resource that should be managed as such. I might even argue, just as Roland Tibbetts recently died, the creator of much of the SBIR's program structure, it is probably one of the most important pieces of legislation the Congress has ever passed. With hundreds of success stories and so many studies by the National Academy and the GAO that if you stacked them up in front of me, you wouldn't be able to see me, it seems like the 23,000 companies that have been involved in the SBIR have stories to tell that are enormously important in their extent and in their diversity. But even after all this debate and discussion, truly unique, what is important to recognize is that what SBIR has created is 500,000 graduate-level engineers and scientists, making that population probably the largest single concentration of technical talent that exists anywhere. When I was asked to testify, I was asked to include in my testimony some mechanisms to educate you on some of those program impacts, and I did that in a fair amount of detail, and I will quickly overgo some of it here. But what it comes down to is that perhaps a reauthorization is to argue that we live in radically changed and changing times. And in a very real sense, we're still managing SBIR as we did when we created it 35 years ago. And it is important that in order to make decisions about how we're going to change the program, we need to be basing those decisions on actual data. There's a novelty, making policy decisions based on factual information. A caveat, I am not suggesting in some of my recommendations that SBIR is a causative agent. It isn't. SBIR funding has made it possible for a whole lot of people, some here at this table and others in the room, to do things that are quite extraordinary. They got the tools that they needed to do the job. What I'm trying to argue is that the $43 billion we have so far invested, and that's a term very carefully chosen, has created a identifiable, verifiable pool of technical talent and capacity that the VC community, evidence is clear, and the major corporate community are already tapping into. We should, as a country, be systematically mining and engaging this talent to include moving away from the stovepipe type approach to project management, which defines SBIR, to doing something about the balkanization of the program that is now clearly occurring, where companies in one agency are not known in any sense by any other agency, and all the agencies are now very different in the way they operate. When I organized the thoughts I put together for this presentation, I looked up the term realized. I want you to realize the value of what SBIR has created. The easy part is you understand that there has been this enormous impact. The second part, which is a new thought for many, is that realizing as a verb means drawing down and making a profit from what it is you have created. So what I've tried to do in the testimony I provide you is give you an overview of the extent of venture capital involvement in the SBIR program. We track every venture capital transaction, and we now have solid data that $90 billion worth of venture capital has already followed the $43 billion, but has gone to a very small subset of the SBIR program. We're the largest single creators of intellectual property. On a daily basis, between 10 and 14 patents issued to SBIR companies in the United States. That's 365 days a year, 7 days a week. We have an incredibly high, extensive activity of M&A transactions. Nearly 9% of SBIR companies are being acquired. They're being acquired by major and mid-sized corporations who, for reasons I probably don't have time to discuss in my 5 minutes, have enormously reduced their own internal R&D capability and are compensating for that lack of capabilities by bringing in and engaging the small business community. We also provided you data to give you indication of the employment impact that the SBIR community has had. We collectively as a group, and the data is very solid, have created are responsible for almost 7% of all STEM jobs in the United States economy. 20% here in Massachusetts, unfortunately, sir, it's less than 6% in the state of New York. What I'm trying to suggest is that we continuously track the SBIR program, and in my testimony I gave you a list of some of the things that we track. And what we're saying is that SBIR is a mirror. It's almost like a mirror for what's going on in the economy overall, but it is also, when you break it out in detail, gives you a clear indication of how the economy is functioning. And our job becomes not simply to modify how the program runs for those who are in it, but how it can be effectively drawn down as the economic asset that it truly is. Forward thinking of members of the Senate allowed us to get the legislation passed in SBIR, for SBIR originally, almost unanimously. We hit the skids in the House, but the upshot was, despite that, we finished up getting the legislation passed. We were subjected to the ultimate of torture, which was a 7-committee sequential referral. But after the legislation was passed, I was recruited by the SBA to get out the word to the SBI community potential of the availability of this resource. And the second was to make sure that the agencies who had been a primary source of the opposition to the creation of the program were in fact in compliance with the law. That two-pronged requirement resulted in my doing what I needed to do, which was simply to follow the money and to keep the SBIR record. And I had no intentions of that becoming my life's work, but eventually that is what it's actually become. So what I have given you in the testimony, the full testimony, is a clear indication of how the money has flowed. One of the things that we did do is we look at things like understanding who's new to the program and who isn't. And one of the charts, which I hope you pick up on, is to give you clear indication that despite, since the last reauthorization, and increasing the availability of funding, the number of awards, the number of companies that are involved in the program has dropped precipitously. And that precipitation, I'm suggesting, is partly to do with the change in the rules when it came to who's eligible for venture capital in the SBIR program. Venture capital has always been a factor in the SBIR program, and I have a table in my testimony that plots that by every single agency. But it's startling when you realize that a full 61% of all of the venture capital funded firms in the SBIR program have an NIH connection. What's interesting and not nearly so obvious is that there is also a similar connection of some like 32% of all those who are VC funded are in DoD. Those are very exciting numbers, but as a practical matter, it also means that there are a huge percentage of companies that are not getting venture capital and whose access to the additional resources they need are seriously curtailed. One thing I will finish off on the VC component is that it is important to recognize that, and we document this very carefully, 1 in every $6 invested by the venture capital community in the United States is going to an SBIR company. Those guys are not fools. They are going to where the quality is, where the value is, and where the potential is. And we should feel very proud of the fact that they're coming, but also very scared of the fact that they're coming in such very large numbers. I find myself asking the question, when we are funding companies that are in receipt of major amounts of venture capital, whom are we not funding where that company's access is not into the venture capital funding that is available to so many others? I mentioned that we have been very active in the SBI, in the patent area and in the VC area, but one of the things I want to move on to is the fact that the large corporations are increasingly, for a whole lot of reasons I can explain, downsizing their internal R&D operation and coming in major numbers to the SBIR program. The data I gave you on M&A shows clearly who's buying SBIR companies, and it's predominantly the major corporations. There is a steady stream of people who are from major and mid-sized corporations who are coming to SBIR because it is the largest single concentration of technical talent. When we were passing SBIR originally, 15% of engineers and scientists with graduate level degrees were employed in small firms. That number is now 37%. 37%, and yet the amount of money that we're getting in the SBIR program has not substantially increased over that same time period. What I also tried to do, because you asked me to look for talking points, and obviously I've run out of time, and so I'm going to give these very quickly. There are We think there are lessons to be learned from how the venture capital community manage their portfolio that could be being applied to managing SBIR as a portfolio. Not the whole program, but let's try it out as a pilot. The second is, my judgment based on what we're looking at right now is that the agencies have become much more risk averse than they used to be. They are increasingly asking for projects that have a near-term application and requirement. And we are no longer doing the work, the Qualcomm-type work, where Irving Jacobs told you in Congress that SBIR funded their work at a point in time when nobody else would give them the time of the day. We're doing far less of that than we used to be doing. We need to be looking at ways in which the SBIR community have access to demonstration funding. There is in every agency a pool of money that is designated for those regularly in receipt of R&D funding to go on to the prototype development activity. We don't have any of that sort of access. And offering a second phase 2 is frankly not the answer, which is what the last legislation did, because that simply reduces the pool that's available for other companies. We need to empower the program managers to allow them to do things that are different from the way that they have previously been doing. Navy, years ago, for example, deconstructed a project for container shipping security, divided it into 9 component pieces, recruited 9 SBIR companies, put them together as a team, and that technology is now the way that the system for container shipping security in the United States is completely handled. We should be doing more of these types of things, not expecting the small firm to put the whole pathway to commercialization, but to bring their talents to bear in team-type projects that are far more valuable. We need to empower the SBIR program managers, probably the most dedicated group of federal employees you're ever going to find. Give them an opportunity to try out ideas and not be looking over their shoulders to see whether or not that will draw them trouble. We need to encourage SBIR companies to look at other ways of generating revenue. In the VC community, it is a commonplace condition that the technology that you own has a broader set of applications than you can apply, and so you license that technology out and generate a revenue stream. We don't do that in the SBIR program, and we should be doing that. And here endeth the lesson. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll yield to Congressman Moulton for the first question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And in your compelling and lengthy testimony, you mentioned that there are different agencies that oversee programs. And this is something that we heard during our recent hearing in Washington, and that not all the agencies handle things the same way, and their results differ as well. And so I'd like to ask the rest of the panel to comment on any differences that you've seen among the agencies' administration of this program, and where are there lessons to be learned? Charles?
Well, I think, as you know, Representative Moulton, in addition to running Aerodyne, I've served since 2002 on the National Research Committee that, at Congress's request, compares the programs among the 5 largest agencies and tries to identify best practices and identify poor practices and encourage them to learn from one another. We find that, for instance, in some agencies, SBIR and STTR programs are run really as a single entity. There's very little distinguishing the two, except for some rules about how much money might go out to a non-public.
And do you think is that a positive thing or a negative thing when they're run as such a
our interpretation, and this is brought out clearly in the STTR report for the 5 agencies that was just published by the National Academy, is that in the various agencies, some agencies have a desire to promote more basic research, as we heard, and others do not. in the areas where more basic research is not as highly valued as some of us think it should be, the special access to universities and other non-corporate, nonprofit research agencies, research institutes that STTR promotes directly is not particularly, isn't an added attraction for some of the agencies.
But let me just get to the heart of it. I mean, do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing when these programs are managed together?
Well, our conclusion is that the program managers are using the STTR in the way that works best for their agency. And it's just a fact that some agencies are moving away from sponsoring as much fundamental research as the program used to have. And I think there's a wide feeling among the SBIR companies that maintaining some very fundamental research topics in the solicitation would be very good for the program going forward.
Thank you very much. David?
I agree, excuse me, that there should be a different approach. There are certain agencies that, let me use the expression, mission agencies, such as the Department of Defense, in which they would be a potential customer, not the exclusive, but a customer for the technology. And I think that over the last decade, the Department of Defense has become aware of how valuable this new technology development program can be to provide technology spiral upgrades toward the national mission. And so clearly their emphasis would be of necessity different than perhaps the National Science Foundation. But I think there needs to be a room for both of those opinions and those emphases. Even within DoD, there shouldn't be an emphasis only on the highest technology readiness level, TRL, that there needs to be some, in this valley of death, this technology has reached a certain maturity, but it is a long way away from the TRL 9, if you'll let me use jargon, the highest technology readiness level where you can hand it to a warfighter or put it on the fleet. And so the SBR takes it so far. One of the suggestions I was making was to let the program take it a touch further to where in DoD, the mission agency would then begin to put core funds against it. For the non-mission agencies, they should reach out toward the commercial world. But once again, I'm advocating that perhaps more funds be placed in after the phase 2 to move it closer to a commercial product. We have transitioned things to commercial products, and the result of a phase 2, which worked in the laboratory, is not a compelling story to the pharmaceutical company who wants to buy a sensor to put on its analytical line. And so there still is a gap.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. You have the Massachusetts and Connecticut SBA person here and the regional director. I want to ask you about risk, because a lot of what we're doing here today is talking about risk, engaging in risk, how do we measure risk, and what are the benefits of risk. Therefore, on that continuum, and you talk about continuing that risk through phase 2 with presumably marginal things at the moment, but with great potential. I want to ask you if you think that, in general, we measure risk appropriately. If that's a fair question.
Is that for me or the
Anybody.
minister?
No, I mean, you have a chance to talk to the couple of big shots here. We might as well.
I
advantage.
think it's a $2 billion a year program. It should be managed like a portfolio.
Maybe move your microphone a little closer.
It should be managed like a portfolio, and there should be higher risk components of the portfolio and lower risks. And how to measure it is a very inexact art, but I think technology readiness levels are a proxy for risk that we're taking. And so I like the idea of experimentation that some agencies might be focused more on pure research and others on product development. NSF certainly is strong on commercialization, but I think it needs to be managed as a portfolio.
Mr. Kolb?
My personal opinion is that not only in the SBIR and STTR program, but in federally funded research in general, there is too little high-risk, high-potential reward work going on, things that can really change the game. And given the fact that budgets in many agencies, DOD in particular, in terms of their normal 6.1 to 6.3 research and development funding, that those dollars are not nearly as plentiful as they were during the Cold War and so on, when there was a lot of opportunity to do research to help our nation's military. So now, many of the DOD sub-agencies use the SBIR STTR program to solve current and relatively narrow problems. And I don't fault them for that. They have these problems. They don't have options to get money to solve them any other way than to...
You know, about 15% of the applications are actually accepted.
Yeah, that's correct as well. But I think all the agencies would benefit from having some funds identified to put on what look like very high-risk proposals, but if they prove to be true, could really change how the agencies run their businesses.
Mr. Green?
I could bring a different perspective from the ones we are hearing. We're tracking newcomer, oldcomers into various agencies, and we were asked to do that by the SBA. And one of the things that leapt out at us is that there's a significant percentage of the agencies are going with the guys they already know. And the ability of newcomers to get into the program is dropping quite precipitously. If you're talking about, for example, any one of the Air Force, Navy, Army, and the like, their percentage of newcomers in any 1 year is incredibly small. Interestingly, in NIH, it's quite high. It's almost 40%. The conversion rate to phase 2 and the ability of that company to go on is an issue to be discussed. But I think there are ways that the agencies are mitigating their own risk by who they're choosing to fund. If a company, one of the things I didn't get a chance to mention is that when you look at venture capital in the SBIR space, there used to be a clear pattern. There was a company would be formed or get its SBI award or vice versa, but it was happening in the same sort of time horizon. And sometime later, venture capital would come onto the scene. There is virtually no venture capital being awarded anymore to a company that started with SBIR and no venture capital. All the venture capital is going to companies that already have venture capital, that all the companies...
So what you're saying, the whole process has become risk averse.
That's right.
Mr. Green?
I guess, remember, the SBIR program is 3% of the RD&T&E budget. And so your statement really needs to be reflected more broadly across the whole research structure of the United States. I mean, I think this SBIR program, when it was created, was to address America's, at that time, inadequacy to transition great ideas to products. That was the concept of the Japanese were doing far better a job at it than we were at that time. So by that, I think it began with a bent toward the practical. However, your question is a very good one. Fundamentally, America has become, I believe, focused too much on the immediate payoff.
Well, what I'm suggesting is that, and this is going to sound strange coming from my side of the aisle maybe, but that the fact that this program is so successful is actually, in a strange way, a counterindicator. That, thank you for nodding your head, I appreciate it. That if you were doing things correctly, you would push that envelope until you reached a point where you actually started to lose. that would be that inflection, that XY axis that suggests you that you're taking the maximum amount of risk with the minimum amount of loss opportunity. And it's hard right now to get anything authorized. You know, I'm fairly confident this will be reauthorized. So I wanted to ask you, Mr. Green, with your indulgence.
Of course.
That you mentioned phase 2, and you're disappointed that you see these wonderful things at phase 2 that aren't carried on because at some point somebody says, this is too risky. It's not going far enough, fast enough. How do you change that dynamic? Who's the guy who makes that decision, and why shouldn't he make or she make that decision since it's public money?
The SBIR programs have a legislated amount of money, and yes, different companies have demonstrated different efficiencies, and I'm sure there are cases where the Phase 2 program is adequate to create a commercial product. But most often, it matures it to a certain level, and it is a competitive process. But when we take that experimental prototype and we go to a commercial company, they say, that's fine, give me the part number and I want to buy it. The commercial entity does not want to fund any R&D. They want to have essentially a finished product. So that gap can either be filled with the company's retained earnings, external investment, and often even to go from that point of the prototype to the product takes a long time.
Can you give me an example?
We're building an instrument for the pharmaceutical industry, and it measures freeze-drying efficiency. The benefits are manifold in that industry, a lot of the medicine could cost millions of dollars. But yet they want to buy an instrument that is proven and will cost $100K. The NIH SBIR and NSF SBIR that we had to mature it took it along a certain distance, but we still needed to invest significant money. Our company, we explore all the pathways. We invested our own money. We took money from another commercial company as essentially a advanced loan, if you will, an advanced payment, and we eventually matured that to a product, but it took many years. If the SBIR, as it has done in the 2011 reauthorization, permits there to be the next stage of investment of SBIR funds, then that would have moved much more quickly, and it would have probably produced a better product. We have also tried to spin technologies out to a new company with venture-funded partners. And in that case, the SBIR technology was a certain maturity, but it was still a very long road to a product. And so as a result, the venture funding needed sequential rounds of funding to have that technology reach product and reach the market. And oftentimes those companies have a fail just because the technology takes a certain amount of time and it takes a certain amount of money. And in that process, often the founders are diluted out of the process. And the venture entity itself faces, as we know, these statistics that only a small fraction actually become home runs, and many fail. And I would argue yet a little more development funding on the government's part would increase the yield out the other end.
And I would concur, and I think a related issue to that is that small firms almost by definition are component, not full systems builders. And no matter the fact that I think SBIR is amazing, we shift the primary burden of risk resolution to the small firm. It becomes your job, their job, to get together the other assets that are required to continue the process. And I think there is an argument to be made by standing back, not the whole program, just parts of it, but standing back from some of these types of concerns and experimenting with different ways of mitigating the risk so that we're not putting the entire program at risk, but we are seeing whether or not trying certain things.
But doesn't it at some point become almost, it's scientific and it's practical, but at that level it becomes very subjective. Don't you think, Mr. Green? So how do you do that?
You Well, it does involve it does require the engagement and involvement of the government program managers in that evaluation, not necessarily so much the commercial as the commercial and the technical together. I will simply state that we did have SBR. We had 2 SBRs on this technology from different agencies for different missions, but we've had to seek many, many times that amount of money afterwards to see this through to a product. And it has also taken many years because it was moving to get accepted in by the government. It took many years for the governments to recognize, test, evaluate, and then put it into their planning documents.
Well, thank you all. It's been wonderful testimony, especially from people who've had, in your case, since 1982. So I would imagine there's no one in the country knows more than you do about this program. So we're grateful and grateful for your statement. I want to thank you all again. Independent research conducted by the National Research Council at the National Academy of Science and the Government Accountability Office have shown that the SBIR and STTR programs are meeting or exceeding most of their statutory requirements. They're good programs that do what they were supposed to do, and that's very good for our country, as you've heard today. But we can do better. We will take the suggestions you've made and provided with us today, work to incorporate them, and I'd urge you, if you have an idea that we can put in the form of an amendment or a bill, that Congressman Moulton and I will certainly, in our position, are capable of carrying that forward and trying to sell your suggestions. And I'll turn to you for your closing statement, if you have.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank all of you for coming here, not just those of you who came to testify, but all of you who came to participate and to listen to this hearing. It's difficult for us to do our job in Congress without truly acting as your representatives, and that means coming to hear and listen to you and to understand at the ground level how these programs are working. We are looking forward to reauthorizing this program, but we hope to do so with some necessary improvements, and some improvements that will help the program not only continue its amazing track record to date, but really expand on that success for the years to come. As a member of not just the Small Business Committee, but the Armed Services Committee as well, I see every single day how important it is that we continue our technological development to compete with our adversaries across the world. So in that particular window for DoD, I understand how critical this program is. And we have a little bit of catching up to do. So it's time to make sure that we not only reauthorize this, but improve it for the future. And your testimony today has been immensely helpful for that. So thank you all very much for participating. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. And I think, along with my ranking member here, we both go back with I am certainly a more enthusiastic vision about this program. I'm grateful for that. And there is a difference between expense and investment. These are clearly investments in our future. I've heard that from everyone here today. I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days to submit their statements and supporting materials for the record. Without objection, so ordered. This hearing is now adjourned, and thank you very much.
Eloquent.
I worked on this because I knew this is really, really,
How are you? Good to see you.
and I am very,
Well, I wouldn't miss this.
This is
I hate to pick on
This
you,
is-
but